It, with very low hours like that in a Kubota, for that, and that's a four-wheel drive, front-end steer. This is not four-way steer, is that correct? Front-end steer. And assuming you got a 1 yard bucket, and you're going to be moving piles of snow when we have snow. I did some calling around to rent at Bobcat, that size or even larger, and also a backhoe bucket. And a backhoe bucket is, when you're piling up the snow, is going to be probably 1.5 yards to 2 yards, depending on the weight of the snow, because that's going to have a lot to do with your Kubota too, wet stuff. That is going to move snow more quickly and higher volumes of it by renting it. It costs you today, on today's rental rate, $250 a day to do that. The Bobcat, whether it's the rubber track or the skid tires on that thing, which moves very quickly and in many ways faster. In my younger days, when I was in college, I actually made money in the wintertime, running around to diamond parking lots in the middle of winter and removing snow, and it clears out pretty quickly. That's $200 a day. So I took an average of $225 a day and divided it into a $15,000 amount that I think that you probably get out of that tractor minimum for the hours that's on that right now. You get about 60.5 or 6, almost 60, actually almost 67 days out of that, however that math works out. And so if we have 3 snow events a year, that's 3 into even 60, that's 30 years of using that thing, and you don't have a piece of equipment to maintain. And if you don't have snow, you're not spending any money on it. But in the meantime, you have a piece of equipment that's sitting there being used for very minimal utility use. And does that make sense for us to put our resources in that? It doesn't make sense to me when I look at it that way, strictly from a snow removal basis. If it was something that, a piece of vehicle that was necessary to be used quite often, where the manhole lids could not be lifted by a forklift, and I happen to know that a lot of those lids are lifted by forklifts, incidentally. And also, I don't know how much maintenance you do in your landscaping relative to that tractor versus a wheelbarrow for picking up weeds or whatever. I'm not convinced that we shouldn't sell that. And I'm willing to wait to take a look at it. If it's not time sensitive, it's probably still going to be worth $15,000, 6 months or a year from now, provided it's maintained. But when I do the math on that, it doesn't make any sense to keep it.
I certainly understand your point, and if we were looking to invest into one, I would completely agree with you. But we've already paid for this. We've paid the penalty to the FDA, and I really feel that we would be losing money overall, whether it's hiring people to come in to do our landscaping or to maintain our stops. And when the thought process many years ago upon getting a tractor was also possibly getting attachments for sweeping, pervious concrete, is it pervious?
Pervious. But you need a vacuum system for that.
That would
a sweeper isn't going to do you much good on that.
That would be preferred, but we do not have that. I do not know if they make an attachment for that, but there is definitely a lot of concrete that we should be making.
I think you have a better argument for having a vacuum system or a vac system for cleaning the pervious concrete than snow removal for that component. And
I just believe there's so many uses that we look for in the future for that piece of equipment with the attachments that we couldn't afford at the time. Looking to the future, I think that's the direction that we should go in.
Okay, well, if this is not time sensitive,
Right.
excuse me, Sean.
I just wanted to bring up, so again, the last couple of years, we've had no snow. And anytime we get, 2 inches or more, it spells trouble for us and to the tune of shutting down service. And if we can't get out of here, and we can take, if we have one event, you're looking at 8 hours or more with that tractor, just in one day. And we have someone here that ran the plow when she worked for us. And this was the report I got firsthand. We moved snow all day, all night, and we still had no place to put it. And so our thought was being able to clear out the driveway. We can only push the snow so far, scoop it, just dump it right over. We don't have to have huge piles to dump it right over the curb, to keep it clear for us to get out, so.
You guys deal with this on a daily basis, I don't, the rest of the board doesn't. And I really rely on your input, but I think we have an obligation to challenge your input, and I hope you respected that.
Definitely.
Okay.
Just one more thing, and not in challenge of your input, but in support of. If there's an event, the plow is already here. Okay. If there's an event and the tractor's not already here, we now have probably 2 man-hours spent in sending somebody to the rental facility, inspecting the rental piece of equipment, getting it loaded on the trailer, bringing it back here. That's if the rental facility is open, because we're in the middle of a snow event. And then you have the same 2 man-hours taking it back. That's assuming we rent from Diamond Rental, which is close by, and bring it back. I rent from them frequently. The other thing is if you have the piece of equipment here, you can have somebody that is trained and licensed to operate that piece of equipment. If you go out and rent a piece of equipment and you put an employee on it and they do not have something in their training record that says they have been properly trained and properly licensed to operate that piece of equipment and they get hurt, we are liable. That's the big key issue, is the L&I part of it. And I think for that reason, we should keep it here, study it, see how much we actually use it. I didn't realize those covers weighed that much. I certainly don't want that being a minute. But I think it's prudent to keep it and just see how it weighs up. But I don't think rental is an option.
I'm suggesting that we bring this conversation back. So I don't know if I need to make a motion to prolong the conversation, but there's some outreach that I'd like to be able to ask some questions, do some outreach in Island County to see if there's a possibility of contracting. They're up at 4 in the morning, so maybe we could, one of my ideas is that maybe we can sell it, put that in a snow removal or maintenance account that's for that, and then that could pay out that contract amount when an incident happens, and that would probably give us 15 years of service potentially at the rate we have snow incidences. But I don't know if that's even possible. And so if there's support from the rest of the board, I'd just like to postpone this table. Thank you. This conversation until I can gather up some more information, and maybe other board members do, and then maybe Rick and Ken can go out there and inspect the manhole cover to determine what type of chain and how you insert it and how you lift it and what are the inch measurements and whatever, and the metal that's involved and the type of weather you have to have on the day that you do it.
I would still second your motion to table it.
All right. So I'd say like maybe like a couple months. A month. I'm a little backed up.
Give us a specific date.
I don't know what.
3 months.
3 months.
Is that too long?
90 days study.
90 days. We have 90 days.
90 days.
We got budget stuff, there's just a lot going on.
Yeah. Okay, a motion has been made by Ms. Johnson to table this and to bring it back in 90 days. Or at our...
3 months at whatever.
At 3 months, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't do it exactly 90 days. That would be Christmas Day.
At 3 months. And the second by Ms. Sanderson, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. Those in favor of tabling this for 3 months?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries unanimously. It was tabled. You have that Kubota for 90 days. for sure.
For sure. Put it to good use.
Yeah, all right. At this particular time, public input and comments for anything that wasn't on the agenda. You can express your thoughts, questions, whatever you want. The board may or may not answer your questions at this time. You have 3 minutes. Please identify yourself, and it's open now.
Angela Brown, Cape Breland. I just wanted to know if there's any more work done on establishing some sort of policy for how we use the vehicles in the fleet. I'm not talking about the transport buses or things like that. We spoke about this at the last meeting where there was a traffic accident and an employee was driving a, whatever you call it, a fleet vehicle, but it was a single, it wasn't a train. I still don't know actually why that person was going to a meeting, if that person was using that vehicle for anything related to Island Transit. And I was just wondering what level we are at in one, understanding when it is appropriate to use fleet vehicles like that, and two, in the specifics, how we're going to handle these sorts of problems in the future.
Jen, I'm going to ask you to answer that question. I think it's been answered, at least I've seen some email regarding this, and would you please articulate why that employee was there, what written policy is for transit regarding personal use of vehicles?
The employee was on his way home from work. It is a take-home vehicle for that particular employee. Operations supervisor who lives on the south side of the island. The purpose of that vehicle being taken home is that he is our eyes and ears on the south side on the southern part of the island. When we have emergencies or situations that require Island Transit involvement in an event or situation. So the quick answer is it's a take-home vehicle. It's based on ongoing practice and policy. Policy I will have to
Written policy.
I will have to dig that out and research that.
Okay.
There very well may be even board policy, board action relative to the use of vehicles. That I don't know, and we'll have to take a look at.
And you'll report back to us at the
yeah.
next board meeting.
The information I believe has been emailed by Mr. Harris. The police report of that activity was provided. It indicated our employee was not at fault. Our employee had no passengers in the vehicle. The individuals mentioned in the police report were, as I recall, individuals in the other vehicle, and also I think a witness or two to the accident. So that person was not at fault and was following current practice as far as his ability to take that vehicle home.
Ordinarily, within the state of Washington, aren't there necessary drug and alcohol tests done on anyone involved in a state vehicle involved in an accident?
There are federal requirements as far as individuals driving a passenger, a transit vehicle, and drivers are tested, particularly if they are at fault, if they're judged at fault at the time of the accident, or there is a sense that the person might be impaired. I am not aware of any Washington state requirements for drug testing, drug or alcohol testing for the use of public vehicles, other than those regulations which govern transit vehicles for general public transit purposes.
So what you're saying is that if a state employee is driving a state vehicle home from work, is involved in a motor vehicle accident, and the officer on site determines that it's not this person's fault, that there is no legal reason for them to do any blood or alcohol or drug testing. Is
Now,
that
you
correct?
mentioned state employees with state vehicles.
There are
That would
state
be, that
employees,
could
state
be,
vehicles, or federal, but in this case, it would be state. I would assume the Prius.
No.
Who is on the deed, by the way? Is it the county, or is it the state of Washington on the Prius?
this is a separate public transportation benefit area.
Okay. Whose name is on the deed?
His name is on the deed.
Title, whatever.
Title.
Transit.
It's gonna be out in transit.
Okay. So whatever policy has to be determined by our board, is that correct?
Well, first of all, our policies are governed by the federal government relative to their requirements for receiving federal funds, and one of those requirements is to follow their drug and alcohol testing procedures.
Okay.
We are following those procedures. Anything separate from that would be a board decision, board policy.
And the can I do it? Sure. The RCW governing public transit system, it doesn't require testing if it is not a public transit vehicle.
Meaning a
Okay,
bus or-
in other words, like a bus or van pool or something like this. In this case, it was a service vehicle, and the RCW states that if the commander, I forget exactly how it's verbiage, but the authorities on scene do not think that there's any reason to believe that there's any impairment, then there's nothing required as far as the drug and alcohol test. And in this case, it was, in the case of this accident, it was the state patrol. And it was the authority on the scene and said there was no reason for it.
Yeah, I guess I'm still confused because a moment ago you did quote some federal statutes, and, you know, since we have some federal funding coming in, that would not be the case, is that correct?
We do receive federal funds, and we
Yes.
do follow the federal mandates
Revenue.
for revenue vehicles, which are buses and paratransit vehicles.
Okay. Okay.
There's a differentiating point is between if it's an actual public transit vehicle or, like in this case, the verbiage is.
Ones that
service
use
vehicle.
to shuttle clients, right, as opposed to one is for personal use on.
Do you have any knowledge that we don't have that maybe that operator of that vehicle may have been impaired?
I have no knowledge. I just am looking at policy.
And I think we've answered the question.
There's no way to pay out, that I'm aware of state law. We're not the state, we're a separate municipal corporation under RCW 3657A.
At some point, it was my understanding, and I'm sure I could be wrong about this, but I thought the Priuses were actually a possession of the state of Washington.
They may have been procured with a state grant,
Okay.
but, so that's what the grant agreement, but no, we would be, again, under our enabling legislation, we're entitled to buy property, buy vehicles, and they would be
Okay.
titled in the name of Island County Public Transportation Benefit Area Corporation
Okay.
is our technical legal name, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You got to do your job.
Any other? Sure.
Brian Martin, Ledgewood Beach. 2 questions. A bus shelter for Ledgewood Beach, we're still waiting. And the second one is the Route 1 during inclement weather. If it's foggy out there, you have a very low visibility of the bus. The reader board is smeared because of moisture. Can't a strobe light, and I've asked this before, be put on the bus, but I was told that it can only be put on the bus by the factory.
Good question.
Indy Transit.
Yeah, I think
CT is.
I don't think there's nothing magical about retrofitting a bus, so, yeah.
So they could put an amber strobe,
Would be a white strobe.
a white strobe for use in,
Foggy or bad weather. CT does it, community transit does
I mean,
it.
like the strobes they actually have on some of the
School
stops
buses.
as well.
Yeah,
It says, this is it.
and most school buses have them too.
and some of them even have strobe caution lights that leak when you're going down the road.
We can check into the cost of that, what it would cost.
We'll
per
check
bus.
into that. His other question was the shelter, you're talking about a passenger shelter,
Yes.
the little,
It's been reviewed while in transit, and there were two proposals on it. One from Washtenaw. It's just extraordinary. It's like building the Taj Mahal,
We probably won't
and
do
it
that
just
one.
would not work.
we're talking about, I'm gonna call it the chicken coop
Yeah,
transit shell, one of the glass borders on it.
but we have to have the crash bars, or whatever you call them, have to be removed to put in the shelter.
Guardrail.
Now you're getting into WashDOT. Right
The
away.
other proposal was to take them down at one end, and you'd have to walk maybe about 1,000 feet to get to the bus shelter, and it would be built at an angle. This is southbound at Ledgewood Beach.
Is that on a
State
state
line.
route,
Pardon?
state route or county?
State.
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 See, that's a WashDOT
Yeah.
drill.
I'm not aware of that proposal.
Get
You
you
might have
some
some
information
discussion.
on that after the meeting. I think facilities has information on that.
Okay.
So, pardon, that's a good question for, on our next meeting for the executive director's report, to report back your findings on that. I mean, these deserve answers.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. All right. We're on public comment. We'll come back to Jill after public comments.
Okay, I'll let you go drift for one.
I'm going to drift on to Charlotte.
Okay, Charlene Hubbard, Cookville. So, statement, comment, question, hopefully concise. Statement would be that a great deal of the public feel that government employees are inefficient. Statement. Comment, after working here for 12 and a half years, I think that some of our management staff, if you examine their qualifications and their performance, would be found lacking and let go.
Excuse, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. And I wished I would have said this earlier. If anybody has any comments about employees or any labor-related issues that are fact-based or are accusations-based, I'm going to ask you to put them in writing and turn them into Ida Transit so we can address it in writing. I'm not comfortable having non-fact-based statements being made about employees, regardless of whether they are labor-related employees or staff employees or staff. Put all of these kinds of thoughts or comments that you have in writing, and then we have a record of what these comments are, and we can follow up on those publicly. Would you agree with that or not agree with that?
Your
My
policy.
call, that's my call, so Charlene, I'm going to ask you to do that, or anybody else.
I'd be happy to do that, and I did request that, and you did say you would speak to it. So we haven't seen that yet come out. So my question would have been, is your executive session speaking to that, or is it something unrelated?
The executive session does not speak to what your comment was about some employees not being qualified.
Okay, so it's not, it says there, it says evaluate qualifications of applicants, so these are new applicants. These aren't not speaking to what you said you would cover. I'd be happy to put my comments in
Yeah.
writing.
Well, I think the executive session really speaks to the RCW. That on this thing about our executive session, what it's going to be, the executive session to evaluate the qualification of an applicant for public employees, RCW. That's what what our executive session will be about, and we cannot discuss executive sessions with you or any of the other public or people outside of that meeting.
I don't know what the RCW speaks to, so I don't know what it's about. So that's why I asked.
Well, and I can tell you right now, I don't know that
Well, I'd be happy to put my comments in
either. In writing,
writing, and I don't mean to be hostile. It's simply
I
to have you
appreciate
look
that.
at them.
I appreciate that. Okay. Anything else? Any other public comments? Yes, sir.
I have a comment, Dan Brown, Coopville. I've noticed in some of these meetings I've been to, a little bit of hostility between some of the board members. And maybe you guys can talk about that when you get together. And the other thing is, I find that there's some hostility towards Lance from the board members. And I don't think I'm the only one that sees that.
And you can also put those comments in writing also, because I am not going to allow this board to get into make every effort not to allow the board to get into a hostile confrontation. I think it's really important that we have challenging conversation. And sometimes the voices get elevated. I was not here for what I understand was a pretty, no, the first one I was not here, that there was a fairly combative contest. I will do everything I can to encourage decorum and encourage good debate on issues and not allow it to get personal. So your comments are well taken.
Thank you.
Now, Jill, we're going to let you.
Well, Jackie has something to say about what you just said, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what I want to say, but I need a minute.
Okay.
So what I was going to say in regards to the bus shed conversation is I have not seen like a 6-year plan or a replacement plan or any type of plan that lays out what are where we're targeting bus shed improvements, what those replacements are, and I'm sure it exists, but I think that would be something to see is what is our facilities plan, and under facilities I would put those bus sheds. So I don't know what our future plans are, how we plan to pay for that, how we're going to phase them in. And I would say to Mr. Brown, I like Lance just fine. I have very big concerns about ensuring that the board's rights are protected as we go into negotiations. And some of the questions that were being asked were about our motivations in how we're going about our strategy. And that rationale and those types of questions belong to the board, and we work with council and management to determine our approach. And it is disconcerting, and has been for me, to have those questions brought up in a public session where we're being asked by a board member to divulge our labor strategy in a public session when there are rules around this. And so did it get a little heated? Yeah. Do I stand by the fact that this position on this board is to ask about general things of Island Transit and not use your board position to try to influence a labor negotiation strategy? I absolutely do. And I feel very strongly about it. And I think every board member should feel very strongly about it, because it's the protection of management rights, just as I would never go to labor and say, here's who you should hire for your legal team, here's who you should have on your negotiating team, here are all the things that, I mean, they do what that they want to do and come to the table, and we have a right to do what we want to do and come to the table. And what I was trying to do was protect the right to do just that in order to ensure that we have the best possible outcome in the end. So it's not about Lance personally, it's not about individuals who work at Island Transit personally, it is very much about the process and procedure that I think needs to be respected and has been well established in negotiations throughout the state, and I would say probably around the country. It's very uncommon for labor to tell management who should be on their negotiating team.
I would second that. Well said.
And I would support that also. And I am supportive of having Lance on this board. I've been a union member in my early days for a long time in construction. I support union activity. To me, it's a marketplace. I don't want to stifle a conversation. I will not stifle in any way Lance's input except when it does tread into areas about the prerogatives that we as a separate entity have to go through the labor relations process.
Could I have one more
Sure.
question? And maybe Ken can answer this if you can't. Is Island Transit the only transit in the state that's non-union?
I do not know that.
No, there
I
are,
think so, I think there's a few small ones.
Well, Island Transit is now a union,
yes.
this is now a union operation. They represented, they voted for representation, that's why Mr.
That's why we're going
Lance is
through
here.
negotiating.
And you've hired a negotiator?
No,
Somebody hired, or is council negotiating?
We've advertised for, we've sent out RFPs. That's as far as we've gone at this time, and no decision has been made regarding labor negotiation.
If one is hired, it has to be approved by the board and
Okay.
open meetings.
And you guys will keep track of what this is costing Island, the taxpayers?
Yes, and it has to be, the decision will be made in a public meeting.
Thank you.
If I could just comment on that, it's not unusual for boards like this to hire someone. When I was on the Kuko School Board for several years, and whenever union negotiations came up, because we were not versed in negotiating, and so we always hired someone. I think it's a pretty common practice. We have to make sure we're getting the appropriate advice. I'd also just like to comment on your comment about being divisive somewhat, and I think any board, when you're struggling with a lot of heavy-duty issues, really important issues, you're going to have disagreements. And I respect everybody on this board, and doesn't mean I'm not going to disagree with them once in a while. And voices might get a little loud now and then about it, but it certainly doesn't mean that we can't all work together and work things out. So.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
Hmm?
Any further?
Yeah, just one last shot, even at the county, okay, we're going through union negotiations right now. And in our Human Resources Department, we authorized the hiring of a specialist in labor relations negotiations, because none of us sitting on the board of Island County Commissioners has the expertise or skill set to negotiate with organized labor and come up with an equitable agreement for everybody. So that's why we have these specialists. And we have use outside counsel. So that's a common practice, okay? And it's done in order to protect the taxpayers' interests. In regards to what may be perceived as hostility or deciding this, I would like to rephrase that as perhaps it might be somebody, myself, very much so included in this category, who is very passionate about the work they do, and sometimes I just get a little bit wrapped up in it and emotional, and it may seem that way, but oftentimes it brings out some very constructive conversation. And I can guarantee you one thing: when I walk out the door, anything that's said and done in here is not taken personally.
And the city of Oak Harbor also hires outside counsel for labor negotiations. It's not an unusual practice. It really isn't. And for the taxpayer, I'll just tag on to what Rick said. The upfront cost might seem pretty expensive and to some people unnecessary, but the backside expense to the taxpayer could be substantially higher than the front end cost if we blow the negotiations or the process. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation or put the taxpayer in a situation where we have made a decision or taken a strategy that is not in the best interest of the public. It is a contest between transit management and the union. That's supposed to be there. That's a good conflict. It's a good tension, I should say. But at the same time, we're representing not just management, we're representing the ratepayers, the taxpayers too.
Thank you very much.
And we will recess to an executive session at this time.
2 minutes for a
break, 2 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes, 5 minutes.
Sorry to take that long.
10
I'm
minutes,
the old, but about
15,
that.
15 minutes?
And we're
We're
gonna
gonna need 10 or 15? 15?
We'll take a 5-minute break, we'll be back here.
10 minutes or 15? 15.
And I offered them. I think that they canceled the bus, I think.
No, I didn't, I just,